So this is probably the first Fender Stratocaster that ever arrived in Ireland. It's a 1961. It was ordered by a guy in a show band, the lead guitarist of a show band, but he wanted it in Fiesta Red, and it turned up sunburst. It used to have paint on it. And so he went and did a tour with it and then dropped it off at Crowley's music store in Cork when his red one came in. And Rory, this is 1963, Rory got it. He was 15. It cost £100. So he was playing shows and paying it off as a hire purchase. He dropped in he had a Rossetti, like an old Italian electric guitar that he put in. And he did show band gigs and kind of came back with his winnings every night, and it kind of paid off in increments, this guitar, and it was his favourite thing in the world. He played it, it's all over the Blues album, it was his #1 guitar. It's the most worn, I kind of say that Rory was the ocean and this is driftwood, because he's just completely contoured to him. He wore it away. It's one of the most unique guitars you'll ever see in your life. As Fender recently said, is there a more iconic guitar than this? And for a Fender Strat, hard push to sort of name one. So, the collaborations tracks on the album, there's, Rory's biggest hero would be Muddy Waters. And I think it's definitely in the sort of top 3 moments of his career was being able to play on, being invited to play at Muddy Waters' London sessions, which was in 1971. He would talk about that in interviews, and you'd see like the reverence even in the night, like 20 plus years later, he'd still be talking about it like a child, looking back. And he said everything, because Rory at the time was, when they were recording the album, Rory was still touring around the UK at the time. So he would finish a gig in Leicester and speed back. I mean, Rory typically would do 3-5 encores at a show, so he'd get back late and be real panicked that this would be the night they would kick him off the album, because he'd be turning up so late. And he said the door would open and Muddy would be there, and he had him a glass of wine. Don't worry, just sit in, let's start playing. And they'd play till the morning, and then Rory got a huge kick out of that. He had this Ford Executive Zephyr car, a big sort of Ford car, and Muddy Waters really liked it, so they'd drive Muddy Waters back to his hotel after each session, and Rory didn't really drive and left the car outside his mother's house in Cork, but he could never get to scrap it, because he knew that Muddy Waters had sat in there, and he could always picture Muddy Waters in the back smoking cigars. And so that car sort of stayed outside my grandmother's until I think the house went before the car did. Like, really. So the Muddy Waters track, I'm Ready, Rory would go on to play that live a lot through his career, so I knew that was one that he had really enjoyed playing on from the sessions, so I went, let's include that one. The other session, Lonnie Donegan track that he did with him, because Lonnie was, after Muddy, that was Rory's route into the blues through the Skiffle King, Lonnie Donegan. And Lonnie's had a sort of comeback album in the late 70s, and Rory was one of the guest guitarists on it, I think, along with Brian May, and Elton John was on the album. And it's a track called Drop Down Mama. And it's a lovely sort of like, Lonnie shouts out for Rory when he's playing the solo and stuff. It's just a really nice track for it. The other sessions that he did, there's a track that he played with Albert King on the live disc. That's definitely like an archive super find, because I wouldn't know where the sort of original tapes of that exist, but in our archive Rory had been sent 4 little reels by the record label of the time. So the concert was 75, but I think the album was put out in 77. He got sent 4 little reels to approve the album that he was on, and when I digitized the tapes thinking, well, it's just going to be what the Albert King live album is, but there was a track that wasn't actually used on the Albert King album. So it's Rory and Albert King from Montreux, 1975, and it's You Upset Me. And it's the first track as Rory gets invited on stage. And so Rory gets up, and apparently it wasn't the easiest of sessions, because he kind of got a telegram that day from Albert King's manager saying, can you join us for the show, because Rory was hanging out in Montreux that year. And Rory was a bit reluctant, because he said Albert King's songs are a bit more structured. They're not like loose blues where you can just sort of play C minor over the whole thing. There's much more structure to his songs. was always a bit reluctant. There wasn't really a rehearsal or anything, so Rory just had to kind of get up, and sort of Albert King called him onto stage, kind of then said, don't know who these young guys are or whichever, kind of didn't. And then Rory's like, okay, so what key are we in? And they were just told him, oh, the key is B natural. So like just really leaving him hanging up to dry, and Rory just gets into it. He's a little not nervous at first, but he's tentative about like how loud he can be, and then you can hear him set off in whichever. And I think Albert King, you can get to the end of Rory's solo and he's playing this great little lick, and Albert King starts playing over him because I think he's like, all right, that's a little too much. Like he kind of gets a little stealing my thunder a bit. So it's a really fun track in that kind of like guitar battling way.